So I have notes because I didn't know what kind of either brain freeze or emotions might jump in, and I'll fly away just about to. Okay, so my family and I began attending here in the 80s, mid-80s, and the Kunkee family were somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly what year, but pretty close. Angela and our daughter Beth were in the same grade, went to camp together, junior high, high school, you name it. So we do go back quite a ways with the family. And boy, do the years fly by, as we all know. So when I think about Laura, this verse came to my mind from 1 Peter, describing someone. It says, the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So I do think of Laura as quiet, gentle, precious. Just describes her to me. Always kind. I cannot think of any time when she was not kind or there with a ready smile or, a nod is what it was towards the end. Laura's years were challenging from my perspective, and I'm sure the family knows so much more than I do, but I don't think it was an easy life in many ways. And yet, as I think back over the 35 years that I've known her, I could not think of one time where I heard her complain or worry. I mean, she didn't focus on her own situation. I can't think of any times. There seemed to be a contentment and a peace about her that, as I look back, I believe and know that that's the Lord at work in her, working those things. Now, I'm going off script a little bit here because in the kitchen, some of us who have known her a long time were telling a few stories, and someone used the word, yeah, but she was spunky. And I went, yeah, she was spunky. There were parts of her. I don't know how many of you ever saw her tooling down Lindbergh in her wheelchair along the side of the road. Yeah, so that was the spunky part of her. And then someone else told the story of, I remember, and she did drive back in those early years, and said, I remember once she got a speeding ticket. And she was mad because she knew that light was yellow. So I'm just adding that into the story. There are many parts of Laura. And let's tell stories as we eat lunch and remind the family. But you couldn't watch Laura and Duane over the years and not see faithfulness and commitment, most of all to Jesus, but also to each other and to the family. She loved you guys so much. I mean, so many pictures in your house of different phases of you all growing up and so on. When we would talk about family, her eyes would light up, her countenance would change. She loved you all so very much. And she was, I would say in a very humble way, proud of you guys in so many ways. She just was. And that makes me think of another quality in her, and I wasn't quite sure what word to put on it, so I'm kind of going with courage, bravery, I'm not sure, but she was willing to release you guys to go do what God called you to do in other parts of the country and the world. I never heard her say anything about that, like, I wish they didn't, I wish they were here. I mean, she just trusted the Lord and let you guys go do what God called you to do. That was faithfulness. She didn't stand in the way, and I think that had to come from her faith-filled heart, trusting God and caring most about God's plans in all of your lives. And another thing, I was just thinking, you know a lot about a person by where they show up, what they do with their time. And where have Duane and Laura shown up for years, decades, here at Chatham, at church, in Sunday school, at potlucks, at mission conferences, and on and on. I know Laura was involved in a prayer ministry. I wasn't a part of that, so I don't know a lot about it, but I know she led that, a prayer ministry for moms during some of those years. But when the doors were open, they were here. So Duane, I just want to say thank you to you, because you can't talk about Laura without Duane, but for the ways that you've led your family and becoming a core part of the life here at Chatham. Thank you for loving Laura in ways that we could all see. The impact you've had on all of us here is sort of like the verse that I said at the beginning, the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. Heaven's going to be wonderful when we fly away, those of us who know the Lord. There will be unending joy and wholeness in the presence of Jesus. And Laura enjoys that now. When we join her there, I look forward to knowing more about what's behind her gentle and quiet spirit. And I feel pretty sure that it'll be about Jesus.
Hello, I'm Brenda McCleary, Laura's sister, and of the 5 Barker siblings, she and I were closest in age, and didn't know the picture was going to be on the back, but yeah, that's me. Laura's hugging me, so yeah, pretty awesome older sister. These are just some of my fond memories. I wrote this last night. Wasn't sure that I was going to be able to do this, and so yeah, these are just a few of my fondest memories. So one of Laura's most admirable qualities was how determined she was. For example, learning to ride a bike was very difficult. We kind of tried to ride together. I know I learned to ride before she did, and she just had that determination and was not going to give up. And it took her a long time, but she did it anyway, and eventually she succeeded. Growing up together, she often took an interest in me and what I was doing. She liked to know about my classmates, or what was going on in my classes. We went to a very small school in Chugwater, Wyoming. My graduating class was only 13. I think Laura's graduating class wasn't much bigger. And so we all got to know everybody in our school really well. And she was just always curious and cared about what was going on in my life. She always cared about other people. Laura was glad at debating things and arguing her point of view sometimes. Our mom used to get a kick out of how long the two of us could go back and forth and about a topic, and I think she just kind of enjoyed expressing her point of view. Laura could make herself laugh, which would make others laugh, and then we would all laugh together. That's just something I remember about her family and how much they enjoyed laughter, and her smile used to light up her room. Family visits were always important, and she loved getting together with relatives. She and Duane traveled to Wyoming many times, and they were so supportive of our mom as she was aging, and they were so generous. They did things like take our mom to Teton and Yellowstone National Parks, and our mom might never been able to see those beautiful places otherwise. And so we were just always so grateful to all the generosity and thoughtful things that they did for us. Family was extremely important to her, as has been stated already. She and Duane raised 2 amazing children, and Duane was the most devoted husband and just cared for Laura so amazingly. And I'm just so proud of you all, and will always remember just how important she was to us. Thank you.
I want to share with you about the faith my mother passed on to her children. Unfortunately, it took years for me to grasp the depth of her faith. Many people have a reason to be mad at God, and and the anger people feel often comes down to their personal circumstances, namely some perceived injustice. Generally, some form of why did God allow this to happen, or why did God not show up and do such and such? Most of these reasons boil down to what is traditionally called the problem of evil. If God is so good, why do bad things happen? As a selfish and ignorant child growing up, it never occurred to me what was going on emotionally and spiritually inside of my mother as she came to terms with her disease and bit by bit felt the strength leave her limbs. She had reasons to question God's power and authority. Why didn't he heal her, remove the disease from her body, and restore her strength? She had reasons to question God's goodness. If he loved her so much, why allow this to happen? Why so much suffering and pain? The Christian answer stated by Augustine is this: for the Almighty God, who has supreme power over all things, being himself supremely good, would never permit the existence of anything evil among his works, if he were not so omnipotent and good that he could bring good even out of evil. This answer is based on what the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 8:28. He said, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." It wasn't until many years later that I was struck with awe with the way that my mother was faithful to the all-powerful, omnipotent God who was always immanent and present as she wrestled with the various problems that she faced. It could easily have been a source of bitterness as much as a source of strength, knowing that a Redeemer, Rescuer, and Healer was standing by, oftentimes seemingly just standing by. It forces one to grapple and come to terms with God's providence. But I won't pretend to be able to untangle that mystery for you. And I don't think that my mother could have either. What she did do was believe and trust in God, both in his goodness and in his promises. Some may argue that this belief, in the face of such evidence to the contrary, betrayed a naivete. But I think it was only in the sense that Jesus encouraged his followers to have faith like a child. That is simple and true. I would argue, and I know my mother would agree, that suffering in life with God is better than suffering alienated from God. This is because God shows his strength and power and goodness by giving hope and joy and meaning in the midst of our suffering. I remember coming home from school and seeing her listening to praise songs and hymns on the radio. She would clap her hands and raise her voice in praise to the God that gave her life. I remember how she was always involved in a woman's Bible study, reading the passages, often struggling to write out her thoughts with her shaky hand, but hungry to know more about this God that she knew loved her. I remember how she helped gather other moms into prayer groups and led a prayer time for school-aged children and me, with trust that God, as a good father, gives good gifts to his own children. She faithfully brought us to church to learn about the source of joy and hope, the very meaning and wellspring of life that she found so vital in enduring her own struggles. Mom wasn't strong in many ways, but she kept pursuing and trusting in the source of strength. She possessed something that the world spurns, weakness, and that is where God met her and completed all that was lacking. I think she understood well the words of Jesus. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. God doesn't require us to perform and put on a show of something that we are not, but he desires that we put on humility and come to him in our weakness and pain and guilt, with all our shortcomings and doubts, and trust in Jesus, in his death and resurrection, and the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. As I reflected on my mother's life, I was reminded of the hymn, "There is a Fountain Filled with Blood" by William Cowper. The last four stanzas say this: "Ere since, by faith, I saw the stream thy flowing moon supply, redeeming love has been my theme, and shall be till I die. Then, in a nobler, sweeter song, I'll sing thy power to save, when this poor lisping, stammering tongue lies silent in the grave. Lord, I believe thou hast prepared, unworthy though I be, for me a blood-bought free reward, a golden harp for me. 'Tis strung and tuned for endless years, and formed by power divine, to sound in God the Father's ears, no other name but thine."
Laura Barker Kunkee had a difficult life because of her disability and physical limitations, but she never let it define her. She could have been angry and bitter and sad, but instead, with the help of God, she made the choice to be joyful, loving, positive, and upbeat. Growing up, I don't ever recall her feeling sorry for herself. She had more limits and challenges and difficulties than most of us, but she didn't let them keep her from living. She loved to travel. She loved going to museums and the theater. She liked to read and study and learn and pray for people. Our family vacations were packed with activity and adventure. As a mother, she was very involved, which made me roll my eyes as a teenager. And some of y'all know I had a pretty good eye roll back then. It makes me remember her love and support as an adult. She attended every performance, game, swimming, and concert for both Mark and me. Every day when I got home from school, she made it a point to give me a hug and made me tell her how my day was, and fine was never the correct answer. Additionally, I always had to tell her at least one thing that I learned that day. And we ate dinner together as a family every single night because it was important. Even though my mom appeared weak and small and oftentimes helpless, she was not. She was hardworking, determined, and sometimes stubborn. She had a beautiful smile, laugh, and sense of humor. It was fun to get her laughing because once she started, it was hard for her to stop. My mom's faith is strong and sure. She knows that she belongs to Jesus. And I'm sure during the frustrating times in her life, she looked forward to being exactly where she is right now, in heaven, with her Heavenly Father. When she arrived there, I'm imagining God telling her how well she ran the race of her faith in her life, all the way to the end. And I also envision her getting to hear the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And I am now looking forward to heaven more than ever before, where I will get to run and dance and do cartwheels alongside of her someday. I can't wait to see her in her new perfect body without any pain or disability. It's going to be beautiful, just like my mom.
And the last remembrance comes from Duane. He asked me to read what he wrote about Laura. Duane wrote, "Laura and I met at college in Casper, Wyoming. It was my second year and her first. We were in a Spanish class together. I had not yet accepted Christ. Soon after meeting her and before we started seeing each other, something that I didn't understand told me that I would marry that girl. I did not welcome the thought at first because I noticed that she had a slight disability. She invited me to some Campus Crusade meetings. Others that I came into contact with by being with her also witnessed to me. After we decided to get married, we talked to the pastor of her church and I accepted Christ before we were married. I came to understand that the Lord had chosen her for me to take care of and be blessed. I remember being in a church meeting with Laura when they asked for requests for favorite hymns. Laura requested "I'll Fly Away." I thought about how the ultimate healing of the resurrection would probably be more meaningful to her than to many people. Ever since then, I have not been able to listen to or sing "I'll Fly Away" without getting tears in my eyes. Thank you, Duane, for sharing this with us. Thank you for everybody who shared. Part of today is to celebrate and to reflect and to share stories and to laugh, but also to grieve. This is the mixture that we Christians experience when we see one of our friends and relatives pass away.